An eccentric nobleman in the 18th century swears he's hundreds of years old and keeps popping up in history long after his supposed death. In the middle of Cold War panic, a man in the California desert says he met a blonde visitor from Venus, warning us not to blow ourselves up. And a man on a West Virginia highway says a stranger with a big, eerie grin stepped out of a silver craft, telling him of his distant home planet. These are mysterious people who claimed to be from another world. On May 26, 1828, a teenage boy appeared in the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. He was stumbling around, barely able to walk, barely able to speak. He had 2 letters on him, both unsigned, saying he was a foundling. At first, people assumed he had some kind of disability, but once they started taking care of him, they realized something different was going on. He was physically strong, he learned things incredibly fast, his memory was exceptional, and he had this natural talent for drawing and music. Then Hauser started explaining where he'd been, and the story he told was disturbing. He said he'd spent his entire life, 16 years, locked in a dark underground cell, completely isolated from everyone and everything. He claimed he was fed nothing but bread and water, aside from the substances he was given to keep quiet. His only human contact was with one person, some mysterious figure who taught him a few basic phrases, and that was it. The mayor went public with the story, and suddenly everyone was talking about this boy they were naming Hauser. Rumors started spreading that he wasn't just an abandoned child. People believed he was actually a kidnapped prince, swapped at birth as some sort of conspiracy to alter the line of succession. But unfortunately, Hauser's life didn't get any easier. He was attacked multiple times. In 1829, someone gave him a deep gash across his forehead. He blamed it on a mysterious man in black. And then in December of 1833, someone lured him into a park and attacked him with a blade. And this time, he didn't survive. So, who was this mysterious Hauser? Where was he really from? To this day, we still don't know. His tombstone reading, "Here lies Kaspar Hauser, riddle of his time, his birth was unknown, his death mysterious." The Count of Saint Germain appeared in European high society around 1750. He's got to be one of the most mysterious, eccentric people in history. He showed up at French royal courts and other elite gatherings, sometimes using different names like Marquis de Montferrat. People described him as incredibly wealthy and cultured. He was a composer, a philosopher, a writer. He impressed pretty much everyone that he met. What made him legendary was his claim that he discovered the secret to eternal life. He said he was hundreds of years old. When he spent time with nobility, he would recount historical events with such precise detail that people started believing that he'd actually been there. He spoke multiple languages fluently and talked about life hundreds of years ago like they were just recent memories. And on top of that, he supposedly had deep knowledge of alchemy. There were claims he could change lead into gold. Another odd thing about him, people noticed he rarely ever ate in public, which just kind of added to his mystique. It was like he was this larger-than-life entity who just wasn't bound by normal human biology. The Count died in 1784, officially anyway. See, for hundreds of years after, people claimed to have seen him. As recently as 1972, a man named Richard Chanfray appeared in Paris claiming to be the Count. He even went on French television and supposedly turned lead into gold using a camping stove. George Adamski basically founded the modern UFO contactee movement. It was right during the height of Cold War paranoia. Adamski was a Polish-American writer who claimed that in 1952 he met a friendly extraterrestrial named Orthon in the California desert. Orthon became the prototype for what people call the Nordic alien, essentially a being that looks completely human with blonde hair, attractive features, except supposedly not of this world. According to Adamski, Orthon was from Venus. Adamski went on to write 3 best-selling books describing his encounters with Orthon and his trips aboard their spacecraft, visiting Venus and various other planets. By 1960, his books had sold over 200,000 copies. The big message Orthon was supposedly trying to get across was that humanity was on the brink of destruction, mostly due to atomic weapons. Yeah, very much of its time. And a lot of these reports from the 50s shared this exact same message. And that's an interesting thing about these types of stories. The visitors from these other worlds almost always reflect the deepest anxieties society is going through at any given time. I think that's very telling. On November 2nd, 1966, a sewing machine salesman named Woodrow Derenberger was driving home near Parksburg, West Virginia, when a large gray object suddenly appeared and blocked the highway. A tall man with dark hair emerged from the craft and walked directly toward Derenberger's car. The man introduced himself as Indrid Cold. Thing is, he wasn't speaking to Derenberger out loud. He seemed to be communicating telepathically. He claimed to be a, quote, searcher from a planet called Lunalos, somewhere in what he called the galaxy of Ganymede. The most unsettling detail about this story is the man's face. He had a permanent fixed smile, but it wasn't friendly. It was unnatural, emotionless, almost like an alien's best attempt at appearing human. Derenberger described it as deeply unnerving. This wasn't the last time he'd encounter Indrid Cold either. Derenberger claimed that Cold contacted him repeatedly after that night and that they had ongoing telepathic conversations. Derenberger also said he was taken to Lunalos on 2 separate occasions. Other witnesses also came forward. Multiple people confirmed seeing this strange smiling man speaking with Derenberger on the side of the road that first night. In 1863, on a quiet beach in Sandy Cove, Nova Scotia, a young boy named Collie Albright discovered a man lying in the sand. The man was in terrible condition. Both of his legs had been amputated below the knee. The wounds had partially healed, but they were still raw. The cold was close to killing him. Collie ran for help, and villagers carried the man back to town to try and save him. Once they got him stable, they tried to figure out who this guy was, and they got nowhere. The guy barely spoke, aside from the occasional mumble, which didn't even sound like English. Villagers tried every other language they could think of: French, Italian, Spanish, Latin, and he just gave them nothing. If someone bothered him too much, he would growl like an animal. When someone asked what his name was, he seemed to mutter something that sounded sorta like Jerome, so that became his name. They thought maybe he was a sailor, but his hands were soft, not the rough, calloused hands of someone who'd worked on ships. Collie's family couldn't afford to care for him permanently, so Jerome was moved from household to household. Eventually he was taken to the French community Matagan because people assumed he might be Catholic. He spent years living with a man named Jean Nicolas, and later the Como family, who actually charged admission for people to come see him like he was some sort of circus act. Jerome died in 1912, never having explained who he was or where he came from. The Starseed movement is a lot bigger than most people realize. These are people who believe their souls originated in other star systems. They claim they reincarnated on Earth with a specific purpose: to help humanity evolve spiritually, to raise its vibration, prevent war, or guide the planet into some higher form of existence. It's a bunch of BS, but the movement has exploded online. You'll find plenty of Starseeds on TikTok, countless videos with titles like 10 Signs You're a Starseed or Why You Never Felt at Home on Earth. And some people claim they actually have memories of past lives on other planets. The whole thing grew out of older New Age philosophy and has now merged with all this internet self-help culture. Now there are Starseed retreats, coaches, people who speak what they call light language, which they claim is how their souls communicate across dimensions. Now, to be fair to some of these people, some of them just view it as a kind of metaphorical thing. They just feel kind of different or alienated from mainstream society and don't actually think they're from another planet, which is fair enough. I'd place myself maybe in that camp as well. But others do take it very literally. Omnec Onec claims she's from Venus. Not metaphorically. She says she was born there and lived on Venus for hundreds of years before coming to Earth in 1955 as a 7-year-old girl. According to her, she arrived here on a spiritual mission to help humanity evolve. Her book, From Venus I Came, describes the civilization on Venus in detail. She talks about their cities, how society is run. For decades, she's given lectures and interviews, presenting herself as an ambassador from Venus. Now, there's an obvious problem here. By the 50s, scientists already knew that Venus was hot enough to melt lead, so not exactly a place that could support life, but her explanation for this is that her people exist on this higher vibrational frequency that our basic technology just can't detect, a place beyond our physical reality. And finally, David Huggins doesn't just claim that aliens exist or that he saw one once. He says he's had an ongoing relationship with one for most of his life. According to him, his first encounter happened when he was just a young boy. And over the decades that followed, he says he's fathered dozens of hybrid children with a female extraterrestrial named Crescent. Huggins documents everything through painting. This home is filled with hundreds of paintings depicting his experiences, scenes of Crescent visiting him, his weird hybrid alien children, encounters with other small gray alien beings, his artwork attracted enough attention that a documentary was even made about his life called Love and Saucers. What stands out about Huggins is how matter-of-fact he is when describing these experiences. He talks about them the way you describe a past relationship. He doesn't present it as traumatic. He's not saying he's been given special abilities or knowledge of the future. It just is what it is. Well, that's been the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.